In September 2009, Annie Lee was a woman with an incredible future in front of her. At 24 years old, Lee was a doctoral student of pharmacology who was engaged to be married on September 13th. She enjoyed being a student at Yale and was well liked by her friends and colleagues. Lee was looking forward to marrying her fiancé Jonathan Witkowski and beginning her life in the real world. The petite Lee was a highly ambitious young woman who grew up in the San Jose, California area. Lee was from a traditional, yet Americanized Vietnamese-American family that placed a high value on education and family, which she dutifully followed in her own life. From an early age, Lee showed a keen interest in science and medicine. She volunteered in her community, studied hard, and was always there for family members. Eventually, her hard work paid off as she graduated as the valedictorian of her high school class and was accepted to the University of Rochester, where she earned a BA in bioscience in 2007. The bright and ambitious Lee was then accepted into the pharmacology graduate program at Yale, where she was studying enzymes in order to develop treatments for diabetes and cancer. But all of the hopes and dreams of this bright young woman were needlessly dashed in a bizarre crime that became the focus of national attention. Despite being located in the middle of a high-crime city, Yale University is equipped with several levels of security. University police regularly patrol the campus looking for any student in need of help and investigating anything that may seem out of the ordinary. Property crimes have been high at Yale compared to other campuses in the state of Connecticut, but violent assaults and homicides are almost unheard of, which is no doubt at least partially the result of campus police patrols. Yale University also has other security measures in place to protect its students and staff. A number of closed-circuit television cameras strategically placed around the campus record the movements of people in and out of the campus buildings, and many of the buildings can only be accessed with a current Yale University identification card. Both of the last two security measures played an important role in the Annie Lee case. The morning of September 8th began just as any other for Annie Lee. She woke up, had breakfast in her apartment, and then took public transportation to Sterling Hall on Yale's campus, where she had an office. She left her purse, phone, and other valuables in her Sterling Hall office, and then went to conduct research at the on-campus laboratory. Around 10 a.m. cameras in the laboratory captured images of her entering the building, but not of her leaving. Lee usually returned home in the afternoon, so when she failed to come back to the apartment, her roommate reported her missing around 9 p.m. Campus, local, and state police, along with the FBI, immediately locked down the campus laboratory and began an exhaustive search for Lee. It appeared that one of Yale's brightest stars had been abducted from campus. The case immediately attracted media attention. A bright, attractive Ivy League student had disappeared from campus with no trace. Lee's anguished family and her fiancé appealed to the public for help in press conferences, but as the country watched and hoped for the safe return of the graduate student, some doubted the circumstances. Some people began to question if she was really abducted, and began to propose that maybe she willingly chose to disappear. Perhaps the stress of her rigorous studies combined with doubt about her impending marriage made Lee become a runaway bride. Those closest to Lee dismissed such theories by pointing out that she only showed hope and excitement for her future, and never displayed any signs of doubt towards her marriage. There was no way that Annie Lee would have ruined her future and hurt family and friends in such a way, they said. Unfortunately, on September 13th, the day of Annie Lee's planned wedding, the thoughts of her family and friends were confirmed. The young graduate student's body was discovered in a basement wall of the laboratory. An examination of Lee's partially decomposed body revealed that the young woman had been strangled to death and was sexually assaulted. Initially, authorities cast a wide net in their potential suspect pool, which included friends, co-workers, and acquaintances of Lee's, but once her body was discovered in the basement of the lab, they knew that the killer was someone she worked with. On the afternoon of September 10th, before Lee's body was discovered, graduate student Rachel Roth, who also worked in the lab, noticed what appeared to be a blood smear on a box of towels. Roth alerted authorities to the find, and while she waited for police to arrive, she noticed 26-year-old lab technician Raymond Clark acting strangely. She said he repositioned the box of towels so that the apparent blood smear was not visible, and then cleaned a drain that did not appear to need cleaning. Clark then told Yale police that he talked to Lee in the lab on September 8th. but that she left the building just after noon. The video surveillance clearly showed that Lee never left the building, and Raymond quickly became a person of interest in her disappearance. The police also noticed some scratches on Clark's face, but he claimed that he received the injuries from a cat. Although arrows of suspicion began to clearly point towards Clark early in the investigation, authorities still did not know if they had an abduction, homicide, or runaway bride on their hands. Further investigation of the laboratory turned up a discarded lab coat that was stained with what was later determined to be blood, some bloody clothing, and work boots with Clark's initials. Lee's body was eventually discovered when the odor from decomposition became apparent to investigators, who then brought in cadaver dogs that located her corpse. Authorities obtained a warrant for Clark's hair, blood, and fingernails on September 15th, which was then matched to some of the items discovered in the lab and on Lee's body. The lab technician was arrested on September 17th when he then failed a polygraph examination, which proved to be the final nail in his homicidal coffin. After a series of pretrial motions, at the urging of his parents, Clark pleaded guilty to Lee's murder in March 2011. The judge sentenced Clark to 44 years in prison with his release date in the year 2053. If Clark survives natural causes in the clutches of hardened career criminals, he will be 70 years old when he is released. The abduction and murder of Annie Lee is both a tragic and bizarre tale on so many levels. The tragic nature of the case is obvious. A bright young woman who had so much to offer the world was viciously murdered before her life had a chance to get underway. The case was bizarre from start to finish. Her apparent abduction from the supposed safe confines of an Ivy League science lab to the revelation that she was murdered and hid inside the lab were all details that make sure this case will never be forgotten. But perhaps the most mysterious aspect of the case revolves around the killer, particularly what drove Clark to kill Lee. At his sentencing, Clark appeared genuinely contrite as he fought back tears and made a statement to the court. Annie was and will always be a wonderful person, by far a better person than I will ever be in my life. I'm sorry I lied. I'm sorry I ruined lives. And I'm sorry for taking Annie Lee's life, said Clark at sentencing. Despite showing remorse for the horrific act, Clark never told the court why he killed Lee. Raymond Clark was a lab technician who did not get along well with the graduate students and scientists that worked in the lab, as some described him as a control freak. One lab researcher said that Clark would get upset if others did not follow the smallest rules of the lab, such as wearing shoe covers. He would make a big deal of it, instead of just requesting that they wear them, said one of the scientists. Some believe that Clark, a man with limited education who was little more than the laboratory's janitor, felt extremely inadequate around the graduate students and scientists, and therefore would make a major issue about minor problems in order to exert some power. On the day he killed Lee, Clark sent her a text message requesting a meeting to discuss the sanitary conditions of the cages of the mice that were used for experiments. Did Lee meet with Clark and say something that set the man off into a murderous rage? If that is the case, there is little in his past to suggest such a thing, and the two worked together for about 4 months with no signs of turmoil or acrimony. Friends of Clark's were all quick to point out that they were extremely shocked when they learned he murdered Lee. "This is not the Raymond Clark that I know," said Clark's childhood friend Maurice Perry. "I've known him so long. I just can't picture him doing something like this." Neighbors also described Clark, who lived with his girlfriend and a dog, as thoughtful and considerate. Yale University President Richard Levin also showed surprise, although his statement was no doubt to at least partially cover himself and the university from a lawsuit by Lee's family. Levin stated, his supervisor reports that nothing in the history of his employment at the university gave an indication that his involvement in such a crime might be possible. Unfortunately, Raymond Clark proved that when it comes to murder, anyone is capable and anything is possible. We all know that words we say, if not chosen correctly, can have a tendency to come back to haunt us. But in Annie Lee's case, words she wrote continue in many ways to haunt Yale's administration. In February 2009, just months before she was murdered, Annie Lee wrote a short article in Yale Medical School's B magazine titled, "Crime and Safety." In New Haven, Lee's article focused on what Yale students can do to protect themselves from the crime in New Haven. She wrote, "In short, New Haven is a city, and all cities have their perils. But with a little street smarts, one can avoid becoming another statistic. Unfortunately for Annie, no amount of street smarts could help her avoid the peril in the laboratory that ultimately made her a statistic.